Once again, we are obsessed, I guess, a little bit with the developments in Egypt. Over the weekend, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, and the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, changed their tune. Up until this past weekend, they were saying, Mr. Mubarak, leave and leave sooner rather than later. Over the weekend, they moderated that to say, stick around until the scheduled elections in September, which is, of course, what Mubarak wants to do. That, of course, does not satisfy those in the streets. And the question comes to mind, why did the U.S. government change its posture towards the situation? Is it possible that the complexion of those on the street has changed from a broad-based group of people who are concerned about a corrupt regime and an economic situation that is fairly untenable to one that is predominantly controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood? Now, there are those who are saying that it is the latter rather than the former, and then there are those who are saying, hey, don't be an alarmist over the Muslim Brotherhood. They do not want control of the nation. They just want a seat at the table, which the Obama administration is on the record as supporting, giving them a seat at the table. I read an interesting analysis today in the New York Post which suggested that the Muslim Brotherhood is extremely pragmatic. They know that if they seek the presidency, if a Muslim Brotherhood candidate becomes president of Egypt, the largesse of the United States, the pipeline, if you will, of money, $1.5 billion a year, will then be cut off. So they are sitting back and allowing for there to be a presidency that is more palatable to the United States, but they want to gain control of the parliament. And to that end, giving evidence to that point of view, the Brotherhood is calling for the parliament to resign en masse. Well, joining us to give his perspective on it, a longtime observer of the Middle East, our own Avi Perry. Avi, welcome to News Talk Online on the Pal Talk News Network.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So what is it? Are we looking at a moderate group of people who were once merely terrorists? 30 years ago, the Muslim Brotherhood killed Anwar Sadat. They were behind that, and of course Hosni Mubarak was standing right there and witnessed it with his own eyes. But we have seen in Ireland, Northern Ireland, I almost said PLO. That would have been wrong. The IRA becoming far more moderate and becoming part of the establishment with a political arm that is now recognized as a legitimate player in British politics, and that seems to have mitigated the threat from what was then clearly previously a terrorist organization. Is that what Obama is attempting to do with Egypt, and does he really have the influence to do it? Welcome to the show.
Gary, let me explain a few things about the Muslim Brotherhood. The number 2 Al-Qaeda person is a Muslim Brotherhood, a former Muslim Brotherhood person. Hamas in Gaza is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the IRA is not Islamic, is nothing to do with Islamic fundamentalism. So any comparison between the IRA and the Muslim Brotherhood is improper. The other thing about it is that in the United States, people don't understand what a parliamentary democracy is all about, because we don't have anything like that in the United States, so they just don't get it. You do not, in a parliamentary democracy, you do not have to have a majority. If you just want an example, I can give it to you from Israel. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, had less than 25% of the vote, yet he became Prime Minister. And to become Prime Minister in a parliamentary democracy where it has multi-party system rather than 2 or even 3 like in the UK parties, but it has many more parties. Sometimes 25% or even less, just like in Israel, is sufficient for that party to gain a majority through a coalition and become and take the top job in the government. So even if they do not take the top job in the government, the Muslim Brotherhood in a free democratic elections will get, in my opinion, a minimum of 40% of the votes. And if they do, then they will have not just a seat in at the table, they will have huge influence of what's happening. Either by being in the coalition, or even not by being in the coalition. And so many people in the United States just don't get it and say, oh, they are moderate, they are this, they are that. No, they are Islamic fundamentalists. That's who they are. And don't block that information just because you do not like it. That's what it is right now.
Doesn't that speak, Avi Perry, to the problem with U.S. policy? We claim to be not only a democracy, but supporters of democracies around the world. And we want democratic freedoms for nations. We want them to fashion themselves in our image, or at least be inspired by us. But then we back away from that and we support dictatorships if the dictatorships are following policies that are in what we believe to be our government's interests, and we oppose those attempts at some form of representative government if they are going against the policies, the wishes, the wills, the desires of the United States of America.
Let me make another thing clear here. Many people in the United States are saying, oh, nothing to worry about. The military, the Egyptian military is secular. They will control the situation. They will never let the Muslim Brotherhood come to the table and dictate policy. And this is, of course, in contradiction with the American ideals of what democracy is all about and what Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were pushing last week. In a real democracy, the military doesn't dictate anything to the government. It's the other way around. So if you are looking at a true democracy in Egypt, which the United States is pushing for, then the government will dictate policy to the military and not the other way around, and that will be a very, very, very bad situation. By the way, recent voices from the Middle East today, Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, the Hezbollah chief, was saying, basically implying that Egypt will be hostile to Israel after Mubarak leaves. Gabi Ashkenazi, Israel's chief of staff of the military, was saying, was telling the public to prepare for an all-out war. Avigdor Lieberman, the Israeli foreign minister, equivalent to the U.S. Secretary of State, of course, was saying today that Egypt becomes an Islamic state. So there is huge fear in Israel of what's going to happen to Egypt post-Mubarak. And of course, we all know that even under peaceful transition, the anxiety level in Israel went up the Richter scale because they knew that Mubarak was 82 years old. He is going to retire soon, and there was huge anxiety even before the revolt. There was huge anxiety in Israel of what the next Egyptian leader was going to do when it comes to peace between Israel and Egypt.
The guest is Avi Perry, whose show appears right here on the Pale Talk News Network at 7 o'clock New York time every Monday. So he'll get an hour break for a little relaxation and dinner. And then we'll be right back here after the end of this program. The nickname in our virtual auditorium, Egyptian Queen, I think maybe succinctly points out perhaps the view of maybe a majority of the Egyptian people, with the comment in text, which you may have caught, Avi Perry, that when Mubarak is gone, there will be no longer a Zionist puppet in the presidency of Egypt. Now, I have been reading a lot of analyses by people who are far more versed in the geopolitical situation in Egypt than am I. And there are a lot of those who suggest that the Egyptian populace was never fully supportive of the peace treaty with Israel. And in fact, we have heard absurd allegations recently that the shark attacks, for example, off the Sinai, were the result of the Mossad programming the sharks to attack the tourists to kill the Egyptian tourism. And the New Year's Day attack on the Coptic Christian church was not by Muslim fundamentalists, but was rigged by the Mossad to make the Muslims look bad in Egypt. So with that kind of a mindset, maybe fairly pervasive, isn't it not possible that the people of Egypt are really pushing for a regime that will be anti-Israeli? And could that then perhaps lead to some kind of a conflict? Perhaps the saber rattling that we hear in Israel is not necessarily unfounded.
You made a very, very good point. I wanted to quote some official statistics collected or at least publicized by PEW Research, which is a very respected research organization. They have a very good website, by the way, and they are based in Philadelphia. What they said was that 82% of Egyptians support stoning as punishment for adultery. 84% favor the death penalty for Muslims who leave the religion, and that 59% identify with the fundamentalists. So this is basically the answer to what you were saying earlier about the mood or the current perception of Egyptians when it comes to peace with the infidels, peace with the Jews, peace with Israel. They are all, or the majority of them, are devoted Muslims, and they do believe in what the Quran tells them, that infidels need to be basically eliminated. Most of them.
Well, the fact is that there is an intelligentsia in Egypt, very highly educated, a lot of engineers and such, who are people who are a little bit more worldly and not necessarily so subjected to influence by anti-Jewish propaganda, but there are large bases of population in Egypt that are undereducated and who are fundamentalists in their views and who have been hearing this not just in their mosques, but in their state-run media and in their schools. So, of course, they have been indoctrinated to be anti-Jewish and anti-Israel specifically. And, you know, Avi Perry, just to go off on a little bit of a tangent on this before we go to our calls, I was wondering your thoughts. I've expressed mine here on the program about it, about the fact that we, the United States government, the taxpayers of the United States of America, the Egyptian government, $1.5 billion in aid, all but maybe $5 of it, and I'm saying that only a little bit facetiously, goes to the military, and yet there are no strings attached. There are no requirements that this regime end its human rights violations. There are no requirements that this regime stop the anti-Jewish, vile rhetoric in the schools and in the state-run media.